In recent years, interactive narrative has been recognized as a distinct genre independent of, though often overlapping with, video games. As such, it has its own aesthetics and can be assessed by how well the mechanics of interaction reinforce the narrative experience. When done well, the interactor experiences dramatic agency, in which the mechanics of interaction map tightly to the experience of arousing and satisfying narrative curiosity. And in order to reinforce the experience of dramatic agency, the mechanics of gameplay must be transparent and congruent with the narrative situation. Take detective stories, for example, which Marie-Laure Ryan identifies as epistemic narratives, or stories in which our engagement is driven by the need to know. Within the genre of interactive narrative, epistemic narratives allow interactors to enact their narrative curiosity through the navigation of fixed narrative fragments of an unchangeable event. They usually take the form of detective stories like Capcom's Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney series, in which the interactor assembles incriminating evidence, confronts the murderer in court, and achieves closure by bringing a villain to justice. And this makes sense, as human experience is temporal, and it's hard to write a story without imposing a temporal sequence of beginning, middle, and end. However, in recent years, Sam Barlow has created two well-received, fixed-story interactive narratives that do not implement fixed navigation of the narrative fragments. Instead, the games have relied on user-guided search of a database or video archive. Or put another way, interactors call up, through metadata, narrative sequences in non-linear order. Lev Manovich writes, as a cultural form, database represents the world as a list of items, and it refuses to order this list. In contrast, a narrative creates a cause and effect trajectory of seemingly unordered items. So how did Sam Barlow combine these two opposing trajectories of database and narrative? In our paper, Gated Story Structure and Dramatic Agency in Sam Barlow's Telling Lies, we use Telling Lies as a case study to answer these two questions. First, how can the designer allow access across a temporal restructure without cutting short the satisfying experience of narrative curiosity by rewarding it prematurely? And second, how can the designer constrain access to some segments while maintaining the transparency of interface mechanics that makes for the successful experience of dramatic agency? Telling Lies is a narrative video game published by Annapurna Interactive in 2019 and is the spiritual successor to Barlow's earlier work, Her Story. The player takes on the role of Karen, a mysterious woman who begins searching a video archive on her laptop and uncovering the story of FBI agent David. And it's through this search database that the interactor will interface with the game. The database presents itself like a typical search engine, with a search bar and a dedicated area to show the results of that search. Typing in any word or phrase and pressing enter will bring up any videos that contain a spoken instance of that word or phrase. However, only the first 5 videos, as they appear chronologically, will be accessible. So even if the word love appears in the 120th video, if there are at least 5 videos that also use the word love, and they occur earlier in the narrative's timeline, the interactor will not be able to view the 120th video. The benefit of this artificial search limitation is that it serves as a gate to prevent players from jumping to certain late story videos that reveal deeper backstory or the climax of one of the plot threads. To reach these hidden videos, the player must have found specific or even unique words that are only revealed in certain videos at the end of long word trails. The search limitations in Telling Lies then serve the function of narrative gates, preventing players from accessing later narrative sequences prior to obtaining some requisite information. Gating systems are an important part of murder mysteries, escape rooms, and level design in games, and they are crucial to creating dramatic agency in interactive narrative, because without gates you could see the story in any order. The story is provided with gates that do not allow passage into a new set of narrative revelations until prior segments have been experienced. And sometimes these gates are physical barriers within the fictional space. For example, the Fulbright company's well-received Gone Home is set in an abandoned house that the player explores to uncover a story told in fragments that are associated with certain objects, such as notes, photographs, and a special diary. The spatial exploration seems to be quite open, but in actuality, the story is structured as a clue trail, in which access to later events is cut off until you have literally unlocked specific rooms and containers. The experience of Gone Home is therefore one of unlocking a space in order to uncover a story. Another recent example of an epistemic narrative is Lucas Pope's Return of the Obra Dinn. In this adventure-style game, the player is in the role of an insurance investigator, attempting to discover the fates of 60-odd ship passengers missing from a recently reappeared ghost ship. There is a ghost ship to spatially navigate, filled with hidden corpses, and these physical corpses are the gates to greater story content. It is finding another corpse that triggers the recorded interactive vignette that makes up a segment of each chapter of the larger story. One strategy common to all of these stories is the bifurcation of the story between the interactive element, which is represented by the present tense action of a solitary detective figure, and a fixed set of story fragments describing a past set of actions by multiple characters. Todorov pointed out that this bifurcated structure is the essence of the detective genre, which consists of two stories, the story of the crime and the story of the investigation. Or as Hannah Wood suggests, echoing Todorov, casting players as story protagonists does not allow them to know their own fate and do nothing about it without being dramatically dissatisfying. But an alternative viewpoint as experienced protagonists provides the opportunity to manipulate time and allow players to see the fate of story protagonists, a hook which can generate narrative drive and motivate them to actively uncover why it ended that way. In the epistemic story, the dramatic agency belongs to the least dramatic actions, not the seductions and betrayals of Gone Home, but the unlocking of the doors that lead to the revelation of the next fragment of the story. Not in the deceits, seductions, and political entrapments of telling lies, but the typing in of the right keywords to reveal those plot points. In design documents shared by Sam Barlow with the authors of this paper, we were able to get a glimpse into how Barlow created narrative curiosity, while also gating late narrative content in telling lies. To start, let's talk about the presentation of the videos themselves. Each video presents only one half of a conversation, with the character in focus speaking to some unheard person on the other side of a screen. This presentation piques our natural curiosity, as we are expected to want to understand the full context of a situation, and only after many searches and piecing together contextual clues might an interactive discover the other side of a conversation. More importantly, though, are the words that the characters say in each video. As we mentioned earlier, the search results in Telling Lies contain only the first 5 videos that contain the searched keyword. As a result, words themselves become the keys to our figurative narrative gates. For instance, in an early video preloaded by the game, David, the protagonist, describes himself as a romantic. Searching the word romantic into the database would then reveal 3 new videos. Each of these videos, in turn, would reveal new words to be searched that further reveal new videos in different parts of the timeline. To illustrate one possible traversal of Telling Lies' story, we mapped our own experience of one playthrough of the game. The x-axis represents time, as it occurs in the story's narrative, and the y-axis represents which character was shown in a specific video. Each point in the visualization is a single video, and videos are connected by a shared keyword. Arrows originate from a video where we found the keyword and point towards a video that we discovered by searching that word. The main gameplay loop of discovery and investigation of new words resulted in long keyword chains that we labeled as paths and are representative of our traversal of the database. Our first path, path 1, is in blue, path 2 in red, and our final path, path 3, is dark purple. In narratological terms, we can think of the events on the parallel timelines as the fabula, or the plot, and the paths to the archive as the suzette, or the discourse or telling. Throughout the session, we spent the bulk of our time in the temporal middle of the story, following keywords that looped us around across characters and back and forwards in time. At the same time, though, the team's overall progression follows a clear trajectory towards the timeline's final video, driven by a narrative curiosity to learn the conclusion to David's story. David's fall follows an Aristotelian tragic arc, including a moment of recognition of his sins and a final act of violence that takes his life. But whichever path we take, we are aware of irreconcilable conflicts and rising tensions in his life, which cause us to look for resolution, and this desire propels us to the chronological end of the story. It's important to note that the visualization shows only one possible traversal of the narrative, and every node could have led in other directions since we were selecting one of several possible keywords from one of up to 5 different videos. Other playthroughs might focus on different words in the game's dialogue, leading to different paths to the database, and would lead to videos that we never got to see. Each playthrough of the game creates a unique instance of Hannah Wood's dynamic Suzette, an instantiation of all the potential narratives implicit in Hartmut Konit's proto-story. This potential for multiple player narratives through the constructed narrative is by design. The algorithm driving the search engine only returns 5 videos with the search term and does not show or hide specific videos based on player progression. It's not trying to show you new things. It's trying to hide chronologically later videos using the same search term. The search terms that reveal later sections are like Easter eggs hidden in select segments. They are unique terms that you are not likely to guess unless you have gone through a lot of the story. For example, we don't find out that David Jones's real name is David Smith until a very late scene, and Smith is the only keyword we personally found to unlock the final suicide scene. This gating technique uses unique search terms the same way that Gone Home uses hidden keys and secret locker combinations, but it differs in how the gates are constructed and enforced. In Gone Home, the gates are enforced by the system's code. In Telling Lies, though, the gates are enforced by the design of the script. The design documents that Sam Barlow shared with us included an elaborate spreadsheet cross-listing every word in the script and every video segment. It makes clear that the game script, its entire gating mechanic, was intentionally designed so that earlier segments have more successful search terms than later ones. Each video in the spreadsheet is tagged with a hits value that represents the number of unique keywords that, when searched in the database, will return that video segment as one of the first 5 videos to include that word in its dialogue. For instance, video segment 1 is the first video in the narrative, a conversation between David and his handler Mike. During the briefing, David says the phrase loyal friend. The keywords loyal and friend each contribute to the hits value, and they would reveal video segment 1 when searched in the database. In total, there are 168 total keywords that would return video segment 1, so video 1 has a hits value of 168. On the other end is video 169, the final video in the chronological narrative that shows David's public apology and subsequent suicide. The video acts as a conclusion to David's story and has an appropriately low hits value of 16, meaning only 16 keywords would reveal this final video. And this list was curated in such a way that an interactor would have already spent significant time investigating the narrative before searching these keywords. For example, searching the word David would not return the final video, as his first name is a common piece of information. However, David's real last name, Smith, is one of the 16 keywords of the final video, and the information on his name is appropriately hidden in harder-to-reach videos later in the narrative. That's not to say that an interactor will not find later videos early in a playthrough, but that situation is less likely to happen due to the way the story's information is structured. The dramatic satisfaction comes then, as in the traditional detective story, from revealing the underlying sequence of events and the chain of causation that is otherwise hidden. The skipping around across time actually reinforces this pleasure by offering many mysteries. Every scene revealed out of temporal order raises a question of, why did this happen? Which leads us to want to explore backwards in the story as well as forwards. Showing half of every conversation creates a desire to move vertically in the story, to find the other half of the conversation. At the same time, we are motivated as we would be in a unisequential presentation of a narrative to wonder, how will this end? But one might argue that one effect of the database structure is to undermine the sense of catharsis and closure that Telling Lies' story might otherwise have produced. David is a deluded, arrogant hero who goes from a high position to total destruction by way of a series of crises and revelations that lead to devastating self-knowledge. But we don't finish the story when we experience his suicide. We know that we are finished when we have explored the situation from every angle, creating the experience that Janet Murray identified as saturation. Or as Alex Navarro described it in a Giant Bomb article, you will know when you are satisfied when you know you are satisfied. The ending of the game does not provide the conventional satisfaction of a detective game. At 5 a.m., Karen, our player avatar, inserts a flash drive that requires the user to upload their videos to a government whistleblower site. This prompt provides the user with a moral question not raised yet in the game. Do you reveal David's actions to the world? Up to this point, despite the implicit investigative nature of the experience, the user is merely a witness, and at times an uncomfortable voyeur, of a series of betrayals as David's life slowly unravels. The whistleblower prompt provides a moment of reflection and active participation that recontextualizes the experience. Or it would if the button was an actual choice in the experience. But in fact, the button is merely a trigger to end the game. When either the in-game clock reaches 6 a.m. or you choose to send the data, the final cutscene plays and the game ends. This moment suggests other design opportunities for database narratives. The interactor could be given the task of assembling a selection of sequences that, taken out of the larger context of the archive, could incriminate or exonerate a particular person. There could be multiple possible sequences and a limited time to discover them. The notebook, which is underdeveloped in telling lies as compared to Oberdin's, could be turned into an editing table or evidence bin where interactors create their own interpretation of the situation. Her story suggested this sort of approach in its support of alternate interpretations of the subject of the interviews as a single person or twins, sane or insane, murderer or victim. Sherlock Holmes in L.A. Noire used this technique to invest a player-driven accusation with dramatic import. The telling lies scenario suggests the possibility of a politically themed twist on this strategy, in which there is a single level of reality but multiple patterns of complicity. Another powerful design feature of the telling lies gated archive structure that could be further exploited by future designers is the removal of David, the protagonist. Watching so many videos in which people are conversing with the protagonist, but his part is missing, reinforces the theme of David's elusive and deceptive character. His removal allows the player's investigation of the database to only be informed by how other characters within the narrative react to David. In essence, David becomes a ghost or myth that the users only understand through the perceptions of the characters in the narrative. This ghosting allows for David to be different for each playthrough, depending on how he is seen through the reactions of the other characters. One player might see a David that is struggling to complete his mission and turns to a parasocial relationship for guidance, while players who only saw videos of people reactive to David's violent actions might see him as a violent rabble-rouser. Others might see him as a responsible husband and father or a caring boyfriend. All of these potential enhancements are based on the central expressive strategy of the video archive story, which is the creation of the experience of dramatic agency through narratively motivated strategic action that leads to results that expand narrative motivation and multiply coherent paths forward. The essential pleasure of the form is the epistemological quest, the discovery of more information about a series of complex events in which the paths reflect specific acts of narrative curiosity on the part of the interactor, and the fragments can be assembled in multiple coherent sequences. Barlow and his team have already proven that the exploration of a video archive can produce narratively satisfying playthroughs, given a careful structuring of the underlying fabula and the design of a mechanic that shapes the paths of the interactor into meaningful dynamic suzettes. But it's also clear that the form has more design possibilities that Telling Lie hints at, but does not deliver on, and that remain for potential future exploitation, perhaps by a wider range of practitioners.